especially the earlier ones, there's a lot of people who weren't on those lists either before a Marvel movie was an attractive thing. It wasn't something that you'd build a career on necessarily. That wasn't a fait accompli. But after the success run that they've had, it's become something where people seek to be part of that process. But in the beginning, you were, you had to be original in your thought of how to put the team together. And I think that's part of what made the personality of these movies so offbeat and unique at the time, although now it feels, a lot of people for 10 years have been watching these, it's hard to remember when it didn't really know what it was yet, and it was kind of discovering its own tone.
One of the great talents that John has always had in his career, starting with Swingers, which is still a classic and is quoted and I'm not going to butcher any of the lines now, but they've become part of our culture, which is astounding, and people still, I'm sure, scream at you on the street sometimes.
In Vegas, if not here.
We did go to Vegas for Iron Man, as you just saw, and spent a couple nights there, and his friend Vince Vaughn came, and it was quite surreal, as we were shooting in a casino overnight. But he's always been able to identify things before anybody else does. And you see it now in the cutting edge work he's doing he did on Jungle Book, the unbelievable stuff he's doing on Lion King. Talk about expectations. I have no doubt that'll be the biggest movie next year. In all seriousness, it's amazing. He has been able to do that. One of the things he did that was Marvel, and really saying these are the kind of things. I think some of it came out of your Zathura experience, but that these kind of characters and this kind of potential franchise is the future. I remember him saying that. I remember sitting in a conference room above that Mercedes dealership in Beverly Hills, and saying, "All right, John, so we're gonna be together for the next 2 years, bang this out." And he goes, "No." He goes, "Kevin, if this works, we'll be together for the next 10 years." And here we are.
I want to talk to you about one of my favorite filmmakers that we've had here a couple times, and he's amazing, is Richard Donner, who I know was one of your first jobs in Hollywood, and I assume was kind of a mentor to you. What did you learn from working with him?
I worked with him, and I worked with his wife, Lauren Schuler Donner, who was the producer on, among other things, X-Men, which is how I got involved in X-Men. How I got to Marvel was directly through them. I was attending this school 25 years ago, and I saw that a lot of my friends were getting internships, and I thought, well, that's what we should do. That's what that's what you do. You go get an internship and don't get paid for it. And they were interning at a place I hadn't necessarily heard of, and I for some reason I was like, gosh, if I'm going to go work somewhere, I'd like to be somewhere that I knew and admired. And I went to the old Lucas building, which at the time was a relatively new Lucas building, and on the second floor they had internships posted, and it said Donner Schuler Donner Productions at Warner Brothers. And it was solely my love of Superman and all the things Dick had done that I applied and ended up getting it. And by the way, that was the only resume I've ever filled out in my entire career, was to get that internship at the Donner's company. And I filled it out, I think I went to a Kinko's. Is there still no, Kinko's doesn't exist. There's a FedEx thing down there on Figueroa. That I had to find a template for a resume to fax it in to the Donner's company. And it was really Lauren that I learned a lot from, as she was producing a number of movies at the time. I did a movie called Volcano. Starring Don Cheadle, who we went on to work with, and Tommy Lee Jones, who I went on to work with. Both of whom, when I first met them, said, we worked together before on Volcano, and they both went, oh yeah, that movie. And then we did, and then Lauren produced You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, Nora Ephron that I worked on, and it was during that time that she had this project that not much was happening with, which was X-Men. And I started doing notes on it, and I started, they don't ask for your input, you just sort of start doing it and leave them on the desk and hope they take a look and find value in it. And soon after that, Bryan Singer was hired, and the team started to come together, and Lauren very graciously.
In X-Men 151, yes. Wolverine actually wore the other costume.
they need an expert.
Were you a big comics guy?
I was a big movie guy. That's sort of the only thing.
He's not going to answer it because he's. So he knows Marvel, and has helped create the MCU and this new mythology that stands connected to, but separate from the books. But he actually knows more about Star Trek and more yet about Star Wars. And yeah, that's right. So I remember when we were mixing this film, I got us into the archives at the ranch, right? So we're at the Skywalker Ranch, and there's a building that they claim doesn't even exist, but it does. And hopefully all that stuff eventually will be at the museum going and across the street here. But so you have the archives, and George Lucas understood from the beginning that he was creating something special, and so he saved everything. And so it's like in Indiana Jones where they put the Ark away at the end, that big cavernous warehouse where everything is meticulously documented and filed away. And if you get in there, there are curators that are there in this temperature-controlled, actually double warehouse, with all the costumes, all the paintings, the matte paintings that are done on glass shower doors, and everything, the models, the Imperial cruisers, but then there's a lot of very obscure stuff that some things, oh, that's a lightsaber, that's R2-D2, like I knew that. And then I would walk around with him and with the people who work there, and I would ask them, and they'd be like, let me look it up. He says, that would be the drum from the special edition of the Return of the Jedi. He was like, I turned into comic book guy from The Simpsons there, and he knew every single thing. And I was like, this is astounding, like a Jeopardy contestant. And everything about Disney, too, by the way. You're a big Disney
I know a lot about the Disney parks beforehand. That was the secret. I knew all that stuff about Star Trek and about Star Wars. I learned a lot of it on the fly about Marvel. I knew by osmosis things about X-Men from the cartoon series, things about Spider-Man from the pajamas when I was a kid. But I learned a lot. But what I always wanted to do was build a mythology like Star Wars and like Star Trek, cinematically.
And we used a lot of the Star Wars stuff. If you look at the wipes
The
here,
wipes are stolen right out of Star Wars.
there's a lot of stuff here. We were referencing Star Wars a lot. As a matter of fact,
There's a Look Sir Droids moment in,
That's right.
that's what it is.
That's right.
When Raza picks up the front, the helmet.
The Mark
It's
I
the-
helmet.
It's
Mark
the
I
Indiana
faceplate.
Jones gunshots, isn't it? I noticed that, like the machine gun fire.
We have that. We have
like
the
Raiders.
Wilhelm scream in there.
Yeah.
We have a lot of, we really paid homage. But when we were wrapping the film and we were doing the mix-up at Skywalker, he had given me the book. What was the name of it? I think it's called The Making of Star Wars. It has George and Luke in front of, and Mark
Yeah, it's the
Hamill
big hardcover, the thick, definitive making of Star Wars that came out
in
about
front of the
10 years
land
ago.
speeder.
Yeah.
But it was all interviews that were done by their press people before the film came out. So extensive pages and pages of interviews, and all of them were like, I don't know if we're gonna finish, it's a kiddie movie, I don't know if it's gonna work, or they changed I wasn't supposed to die and I died in it, I don't know what to say, I'm talking to a reporter. So it was like the most uncertain and honest and angst-ridden interviews, and especially with George, who was like scrambling to try to figure out how to make this all work. Because remember, George, what's different with George and with us is he was inventing all this stuff as he was going. And all the stuff I'm working on now is stuff he invented, whether it was CGI characters or digital photography or the edit droid or, all the stuff. I mean, you forget, or maybe because this school, to some extent, is part of his legacy, but he really was inventing a car while he was racing one. And so, as difficult as we had it, he had it infinitely harder, and he was kit bashing costumes and sets and just getting barely enough to get through it. And Kevin gave me that book, and I was reading it, and I remember thinking, wow, wouldn't it be something if our movie turned out to be something people like and is remembered, but we had no idea. And it's amazing how that pattern repeats itself so much when people are on the cusp of doing something that ends up being one of the more significant pieces of their career. It feels just the same as when they nosedive too. You just don't know. You don't know. And it was nice that he gave me that book because it gave me some more. It gave me faith and a feeling that able to visualize maybe this will turn out well and maybe we'll finish this and people will dig it, never having thought that here would be 10 years later as alma mater.
I was just excited we got to see all the Lucasfilm archives, and we have a picture of John and I on Hoth, which I
Well, this is a little side note, but I'm a huge Disney Parks fan, as I know you guys are. Kevin, have you been, like, Marvel's finally coming to the parks, like, how much of a part of that have you been, and how cool is that you grew up going to those things, and now you're actually, like,
best. It's
creating land?
Yeah, it's the greatest. There's a Guardians attraction at California Adventure now. There's one under construction at Epcot. Epcot was my favorite park when I was a kid. I grew up in New Jersey. We'd go down to Disney World. But it's great, and I went a couple of times after park hours to test ride Mission Breakout, the new Guardians ride, and just walk around the park when it's closed. It's amazing. I found out the answer to how many times in a row can I ride Tower of Terror? 6.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we open up to some questions from the audience? Oh, that guy's really excited with the red shirt.
Thank you both so much for being here. One thing I just want to say is this movie 10 years ago convinced me to study film, go to film school, and go on this path. And 10 years later, I'm working in one of the majors, and I credit that to you guys, so I can't thank you enough. One thing I wanted to ask you is, in studying both of your careers, I've seen kind of a moment for each of you where there was sort of like a turning point. With John, I know leading up to Swingers, your friends were actors and weren't really kind of getting, so you wrote this amazing script, and that just kind of blew up. And for Kevin leading to this moment with Marvel Studios being its own company making this film, I'm imagining, looking back, it was a very exciting time, but in that moment, I'm sure it felt like, holy shit, what's happening? So I was curious if you could talk to that moment for each of you.
Well, for me, it was pretty simple. I had almost nothing to lose. There was a lot riding on it because the rights to 10 of our characters, the film rights to 10 of our characters, that was what was on the line. Marvel didn't put any money up front into the movies. This was a loan, and Marvel, the collateral was the film rights to 10 properties. So the worst that would happen is we wouldn't get to make another movie, and I'd try to go work somewhere else. And it was interesting because Avi Arad, who hired me and who had really believed in the notion of what Spider-Man could be and what X-Men could be, decided to leave just before we started, as we were prepping Iron Man 1. He was doing other things, he was interested in other things, and he was sort of moving on. And there was a time when the then sort of head of Marvel, who's based in New York, was on a conference call, and he said, can we make these 2 movies? Can you deliver? And up to this point, all communication had gone through Avi. And Avi was now on his way out, and on a speakerphone, the head of the company said, Kevin, can you deliver these 2 movies on time in 2 years? Yes. And from that moment on, it was just get them finished.
I forgot how weird that was.
Just finish them.
That was a weird thing, that it was, Kevin was sort of the exec that was, I knew him and liked him because we were the ones who kind of behind closed doors were like, we got to get Robert on this movie, you know. And that's kind of the first conversation we had, not in a big conference room, because it was like, who are we going to get, all the things we talked about. And so we had a nice experience of having strategized. It took a long time to figure, okay, let's do a screen test and let's bring him in, and I'll talk to Robert, who was not about giving up.
Did you know him before then?
No, I met him in a meeting. It was one of those meetings also. A lot of the Marvel people had met him because I think he'd come in for Fantastic Four or something, Dr. Doom.
Not that that's the first I've heard.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe Fox.
He had a lot of the people who were there were like, oh no, we knew him already from, and he wasn't like, nobody really thought he was going to be a contender for it. And I met with him, and he was like, he had the fire in his eyes. He was like, I'm ready. This is me. And he was clearly, it's like what Kevin describes. He was ready to be a star. He had done the work. He had gotten to the point in his life where he was ready to move forward and just was out of his own way and was ready to make a run at it. And I was a believer, and and then his body of work, of course, everybody loved him. Perfect on so many levels for it. Everybody acknowledged that. And then we, were told he's not going to be the guy. I told
Who's
him.
telling you that? So did Paramount have to sign off, or like,
No,
where was
it was
the?
more.
No, Paramount didn't have to sign off on it, and I had one conversation with a then exec at Paramount saying, because we were navigating this relationship with Paramount, we had all of the creative control. That was the whole reason we were doing this. But I'm always interested in being a good partner and collaborating, and I sort of floated by this exec. I think we were kind of leaning towards Robert Downey Jr. And he was silent and said, "Have you thought about this person, this person, this person?" And I went, "Oh, yeah. I'm not going to run stuff by them anymore." But there was a great fear. I mean, the people who were in charge of Marvel at the time believed in this, got this financing, let us do what we were doing. But they didn't work on movies. They didn't know anything about movies. So they knew one thing and one thing only about Robert Downey Jr. He went to jail. He wasn't insurable for a while. He was the most famous troubled actor in history. And we're going to put the entire future of our studio behind this guy? Forget it. Forget it.
And he had a lot of good years. He'd already, as far as, that was perception, but he had done a number of films.
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was,
Worked his way up, quite a few, yeah.
Well, he was insurable
He was.
by that point. It wouldn't have worked otherwise.
Right.
And he did something which people forget, but was a genius move on his part and his agent's part, because it let me use it as ammunition years later, which was he was the villain in the Tim Allen remake of Disney's The Shaggy Dog. Nobody remembers this. But I got to say to the Marvel board, no, of course he's insurable. And this was before we were Disney. Disney hired him. Disney hired him to be in the Shaggy Dog movie. And that at least opened the door enough to do this screenplay.
So, when I told Robert it's not going to happen, I'm sorry. He was like, with all due respect, you're wrong. He said, I am going to be Tony Stark. I was like, great. Like I said, if you have the stomach for it, I will not give up until you give up, and we will try. But it's going to take patience, and that's when we were talking, and that's when the idea of let's do a screen test came up. And once you let Robert get on the court, I mean, you couldn't even, there was no way to even argue it. So whatever misgivings there might have been from the time he opened his mouth as Tony Stark, whoever was on the fence, completely supportive of him. There was nobody, everybody at Marvel, all the people that were, wringing their hands and considering all the things Kevin's talking about, all were believers. And honestly, for me, it was so important because as I was trying to figure out what the movie was, the script was being worked on, the set pieces, storyboards, all these moving parts, the idea of Robert playing Tony, I understood every decision that had to come out of it. And so when you talk about what's the moment, yeah, writing Swingers was something I did because I had final draft and I just started messing around with it. And then I just kept saying no to people who wanted to do something. So it was like it wasn't like a thunderclap, but I'd say one of the big ones, if you look at the good ones in your life, one of the big ones was getting Robert to be in it. Even though it was, and I think that was a moment for Kevin, for myself, clearly for Robert, and everybody involved, because I think if you pull that one thread, I don't know that it would, I can't imagine how you get this whole thing that was built without that one decision, because I think that was the one it all rests on. I think Robert's personality and his creative, his tone, and it's not just you talk about us, but really you're forgetting it wasn't like he just stood on his mark and said what we handed him. He's not he was part of that thing. It was a process, and he brought all the energy that he had grown up around his dad and all the films he had done, the independent films. He brought all that to bear here, and it was just a point where we're all ready to kind of meet in the middle. So I think that was the moment that changed everything for me. But you need a few of those moments in a life, but that was one of the big ones.
Did you, something I was curious about, did you always want to direct? Or is that something that gradually came, because you started as an actor, obviously.
I thought eventually I would, as an actor, I would get enough clout as an actor maybe to be able to do my own stuff, but it wasn't like I wanted to be a director. I used to make movies when I was little, but I didn't think it was a realistic option at all. It was always something I would love to do. I mean, I was an usher in the RKO Keats in Flushing, and now, and the first movie that was there was Return of the Jedi, and now I'm making Star Wars shows for, working and knowing George Lucas and you know, and getting to play in that sandbox. And so, but when you can't connect, it doesn't connect even in your mind, where I'm from, that's even a possibility. But as I look back on it, and I think about what it would feel like if I knew then where I could be, I'm so happy and grateful that I was able to have that trend, because I really love, I work really hard because I love working. I love everything I do, like not how it comes out, but the process of doing it. I enjoy even the failures. I love crashing into it every day because I'm just around so many smart people. All the new technology is being shown to me and presented to me. All these great filmmakers and other people to collaborate with, people to give me advice, and you know, you're part of a great community, and it's just, I can't overstate how grateful I am for the types of projects and people that I work with, and it's really, it's a super special thing to find something that you love doing and getting the opportunity to do it.
That's awesome, Walt. Yeah, applause. That was good. Kevin, I was always curious. Sorry, we'll get back to you guys. Kevin, I was always curious with you too. When you were at USC, what did you envision your career to be? Did you always want to be a producer? Did you want to write? Did you want to direct? Like, what were you thinking?
I wanted to do all those things. I just wanted to be in the room where it happens. I mean, that's to quote Mr. Manuel. It is. That's really what I wanted, and that's what I started getting at the Donner's Company. And I knew, of course, Dick Donner from all of his work. Lauren, I got to know more and got to see the fun of doing multiple projects at the same time. And Dick would do a movie every few years, and Lauren would do a couple movies a year. And I started to see how fun that was, which is what sort of led us to where I am. But it was, I would sit in this room and watch filmmakers. I just wanted to be a part of it at any level.
It's getting late, so we'll take a couple more. Who's got a good question? All right. Oh, well, this one here. Yes, your friend is very enthusiastic for it.
Hi, thank you guys so much for coming. Something that's really special about these movies is that they help create super genre into more of like a viable artistic form of filmmaking. And as filmmakers, how do you balance putting your own personal like heart and soul and like what your filmmaker like point of view is, and keeping the expectations of the character and comics and the fans?
I think there's, if everybody heard the question, how do you balance personal with what's expected of the genre, right, and of the characters? I think some of it is just gut, following what you feel, but that's just a way to say that you're using a different part of your brain than the front. I think that there's a lot of, and then those of you who are in school here too, the more you can learn about storytelling and myths and archetypes, it's what led me down the path, because I was interested, I like Star Wars. Star Wars got me into samurai movies. All of that got me into Joseph Campbell. I'd watched The Power of Myth when it was on VHS with Moyers and Campbell at the ranch. And I just familiarized myself with that, and now I continue to learn about that, because I think that characters like these, and genres like these have a form. There's a form to it, and so that form creates boundaries and parameters. And for you to actually, it's like music or anything else, there's a structure to it, and that structure creates a tension between the freedom and the containment. It's the balance, and that's part of art. Like any type of artistic endeavor, I find works best when there's a tension between two different things, because you want to do anything, but yet you have to contain that thing. And so the superhero films, and as we talked, I really had to learn from talking to Kevin about, okay, let's talk about villain stories. What type of villain stories are there? What have you done in all the movies you've worked on before? What's fresh that you haven't done? And so I was picking his brain a lot, and I was creating rules from it. So like, for example, with villains, there's two basic villain stories. One where you're going after the villain, and one is where the villain's coming after you. Like, as simple as that, but that's a rule. And let's talk about the opportunities and possibilities for each one. And we already did one kind of like that in Spider-Man 2, or we already did. And so you're trying to avoid repeating yourself in a very limiting genre in certain ways, because it's a 3-act structure. It's going to be an hour and a half to 2 hours long. and there are certain archetypes that you're dealing with these heroes. And so you play that tension against the form. And like, I like everybody, you know, I don't know that people appreciate Ryan Coogler enough because certainly, everybody sees Black Panther as, look, he played with the form and found a way to bring a lot of personal perspective to it. But you really look at Creed, that's the one to me that blows my mind. Because he made a Rocky movie with Rocky in it that was really good, and like it was as good as any Rocky movie, you know? So he found the rules of the Rocky movie. Not just a fight movie, but a Rocky movie. And I grew up with Rocky. Like I knew, I was in '76, I was seeing it in the theater. And for this young guy to be able to find that way to find his perspective on it, after telling a very personal story with Fruitvale before. So not only could you tell a personal story, but then you could fit into those two things. And so as a filmmaker, I look at that and say, that's on a very impressive level, because you're not just expressing yourself, you're expressing yourself within a style and a form. And so as I get older, I really love to explore form and explore myth and explore old stories, not just in film, but in other, you know, what are the expressions that we like to see played out as a group on the screen? It's not that difficult, it predates film. And so the more you can learn about that stuff, I think the more you could bring your personal to bear, because you have a container for it.
Let's take like two more and then we'll let these guys go home.
We'll answer shorter, I'm sorry. We'll get more questions.
No, I appreciate you guys staying.
First off, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the last 10 years, and I'm going to call it for the next 10 years.
Woohoo!
When I saw Iron Man 10 years ago, my bike was stolen the night before, and when I went to see it, it was in the parking lot, and I stole it back. I waited 10 years to tell you that. But my question, though, I won't spoil the latest Marvel run for anyone that hasn't seen it, but did you know 10 years ago making this, did you always have where we're at right now in the MCU in mind? Was that always a end goal to this current snappy ending? Or was that, did you find that as good?
Well, I would say it.
The short answer is yes.
Well, yeah. In general, yes. The specificity of it, not necessarily. But I mean, that's why Nick Fury came out at the end of this movie, was to say that. At that point, it was, could we just do a Cap movie? Could we just do a Thor movie? And the Avengers movie was the far off dream. That was the far off dream.
That was the one. But we
Yeah.
knew that with those people, it could be that. But this guy could answer that question.
Well, this was after Avengers, and Joss added the little Thanos tag. It was how do we start to build there, and how do you top Avengers? How do you get back to individual character stories after Avengers, and how do you keep building from there? Were the two difficult things as we went through phase 2 and phase 3. But certainly the dream on this was deliver it on time. That was the dream.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that too, because it's become such a staple of Marvel movies. Can we talk about the creation of the tag? Like, I heard a great story about you when you were young and that you love watching the names in the credits.
Yeah.
And Ferris Bueller?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's Ferris Bueller. There was a Masters of the Universe classic where Frank Langella as Skeletor comes out and says, "I'll be back," and then freeze frames for some reason. So I thought, why did freeze frame right at that second? Did Frank Langella come out and go, "I'll be back, forget it, I'm not doing this"? Why did you? And they just had to freeze it right out. I don't know why it was a freeze frame. But I loved having little, and we were by no means the first films to do that. But it was always fun. And the Nick Fury idea in particular that came up, and we shot it secretly on a Saturday, and Sam we drove the car onto the stage, and it leaked like the Monday. But
we cut it out of the premiere.
right.
So everybody who was saying that it leaked, they were all called liars online, like all the bloggers, because we didn't show it in the premiere, and that was like a week or two before the movie came out. And they were swearing, "No, it really is in there, I'm telling you," and it sounded insane. And then of course the movie had it, but we really went out of our way. And by the way, the Nick Fury thing was it was a big part of when Kevin started this version, the Marvel Studios, was that I think he was frustrated by how little how little concern the studios had with the fan base, because they were seen as a very small part of the movie-going public, and they were going to come anyway because they were going to see a movie because it's based on their superhero. And all the effort was getting the people who weren't into the movies, into the books, to come see it, make it accessible to other people. And part of their mission statement was, no, we're going to stay true to the books and stay true to the mythology that was developed. And it was really fortuitously timed, because it was also as social media and the internet was starting to heat up, because I don't know that this could have worked without it. And so you had Comic-Con, but you also had communities forming and people discussing things and people of like opinions. And when I was growing up, maybe there'd be a couple people in the lunchroom that felt the way you did, but when all those groups could get together, they're discussing it, and a real ground roots support starts to swell. And so Kevin and the Marvel team were rewarded for this approach. And the Nick Fury thing was just meant to be an Easter egg for people who read the Ultimates. Yeah. Like, wouldn't it be cool for them after the credits, let's give them a big wink and say, thanks for paying attention and thanks for sticking around, and this isn't for everybody, this is just for you, because in the Ultimates, the way he's depicted, Nick Fury's depicted, is based on Sam Jackson. And so we were like, what if we really, and he's like, really get him? And then he's a big geek and a big fan of this stuff, and he's into Star Wars and into comic books, and so he came by and did it, and as Kevin said, it did trickle out, but it's still the impact of it. And then of course it turned into all these little casting choices that were flippant. I called Paul Bettany because I was in Wimbledon with him. He thought he had a good voice to play Jarvis. He did it over the phone. He never even watched the movie, he said, the first time. Now he's the Vision. It was so surreal. I visited him on the set when I was in London, and he was there in purple. And I just looked at him, and it was like right where we had shot. I think it was on the same stage as we shot Wimbledon. I'm like, what's going on? I was like, I don't know. Life is weird. Clark Gregg was my neighbor. I begged him to do the cameo, and now he's got a TV series. And there's somebody else, and also Nick Fury turned into a 9-picture deal too. And that was just supposed to be a little cameo that he did. I know he didn't get paid a lot for it. It was something he did out of love.
Yeah, and he knew it. He always, Sam thinks ahead. So he knew that maybe it could go somewhere.